Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Hi, it's Patrick O'Driscoll here. You might know me as Pods. I'd like to welcome you to the Adelaide Hills and Fleurieu Farmcast. It's the podcast we produce for the love of farming right throughout the Adelaide Hills and Fleurieu region. And now I'll hand over to Adelaide Hills and Fleurieu Farm Services' very own Belle Baker. Over to you, Belle.
Hi there, welcome to the Adelaide Hills and Fleurieu Farmcast, the monthly podcast where we let you know what we've been up to on farm and for our clients and what makes sense for you to be doing on your farm or lifestyle property this month. The big thing I want to announce this month is our farm fencing demo days to be held between the 11th and 13th of May. First cab off the rank is the Tractoring for Women workshop, which will cover everything you need to understand about your tractor and safely undertaking practical jobs around the farm. We'll cover pre-start checks, lifting, moving and stacking hay bales safely, swapping out the bucket for forks and attaching a slasher with 3-point linkage. And when you book in, we'll ask you to select the tractor brand and size that you've got on your property, and we'll have that here for you to learn in. And we'll do all this between 10 and 2. Does that sound all right? I know I'm keen to get to know our tractor better without all the dull mechanic stuff that just bores me to tears, and I love the idea of being able to do more tractoring myself. Mother's Day present, anyone out there? And we've pulled in the big guns. We've invited Tim Thompson, an ag communicator and educator from Victoria with over 50,000 followers on YouTube. You can look him up, timthompson.ag, or you go to YouTube and put in Tim Thompson Fencing. He has a plethora of information and how-tos on farming, particularly aimed at the DIY small acreage farmer. It's a wonderful resource and one that we have turned to a number of times when we found ourselves in different situations with fencing projects that we needed a bit of a workaround or needed a solution to. So the next couple of days of the farm fencing demo days we've planned will be truly immersive. We want you to get your hands dirty, try out different tools and materials, and have a go at straining fences. You can learn how to repair your own fences and what you'll need in your DIY kit. All this and so much more will be on offer, and yes, these 2 days are free. We truly believe a rising tide lifts all boats. Come and learn from the experts, talk to suppliers directly, and go away with the confidence of a kid in a Superman costume. And we've invited our friends at Dart Agricultural Drones to come along as well. They'll demonstrate their new 40-litre drone, and you can see for yourselves if this method of spraying, seeding or fertiliser spreading is really suitable for you. More information will be released soon, so please make sure you subscribe to our e-newsletter so that you don't miss out. Just go to our website, adelaidehillsfarmservices.com.au, and you'll find it there. Right, this month we sold 6 of the remaining heifers that we had. Yes, it's a falling market for both sheep and cattle, but we really felt we had to cut our losses. These heifers we bought, we didn't quite get the right advice about. They were not quiet enough for us to handle well and safely in the yards. They wouldn't even stand still in the paddock. Now, they did put on quite a lot of weight after they were healthy again. We did have to put one down. I think I mentioned that in the last podcast. And I'll tell you more about that next month. We're just waiting on the PIRSA vet to get clearance to speak to us on the podcast. And he's going to talk us through the autopsy and the results and what happened to that poor heifer. So we decided to sell the remaining 6 heifers at the market. And we got a pretty reasonable price for them because they looked fantastic. And then we bought 24 more, much quieter heifers, and we're really, really happy with them. Once we got them home, we left them to acclimatise in the yards for a couple of days. We gave them plenty of good hay and water. And then on the Sunday, we vaccinated, drenched them with a good 5-in-1 and backlined them for lice. We also tagged them so we can easily identify them in the paddock. I am such a stickler for this. I like to be able to, identify from a distance, yes, that's number 12, and something happened to her, or we'll keep an eye on her. And when you're back in the yard, you don't have to guess which one it is if you've got a couple that look similar or whatever. I just think it's really important. I mentioned last month that when buying in stock, we absolutely presume that they have not been vaccinated. This information should be on the NVD you receive, but often it's not. Quite often, people selling their stock get a bit lazy, and if it's not on there, presume that they haven't been vaccinated. It's generally, if they have been vaccinated, it will be mentioned. The other thing we did was invite the lovely Emma Gilbert along so that she could get hands-on experience working with the cattle. Emma has plans to breed Highland cattle and already has semen and embryos sitting on ice. She's been slowly building her plans over many years and is nearly ready to execute. She hadn't worked with cattle for many years, although she did participate in the SA Heifer Expo, as I did when I was younger. But Emma was so generous with her time and knowledge for this month's podcast, an interview you're about to hear, that it was only natural that we would want to help her out. Needless to say, her stock handling skills were good and she picked everything up very quickly. But I'll talk more about Emma a bit later in the podcast. Now, I think I mentioned in the March episode of the Farmcast that the next thing to happen with our hay paddocks will be sowing. Pods and I went for a walk over the paddocks a few days ago, and he made an interesting observation. Some of the weeds are coming back, but not enough that it would warrant respraying. You see, everything has to be weighed up. Does the cost of spraying the paddocks again outweigh the benefit? It's always a balancing act between producing the best hay we can, the input costs of producing the hay, and good stewardship of the land. We're due for some rain this week, so that will probably freshen up the weeds again. And given they've got no competition out there, because there's nothing's been sown again yet, they could actually get going again. But we won't be sowing until mid-April, so about 3 weeks away from now. I'll let you know how we get on with that in the next month. Rightio, what's next? I was going to tell you about this fab summer crop that is planted out the back and was here when we bought the property in December. It's called a fast summer blend and is a mix of 20% brassica, 20% chicory and 60% millet. And both lots of heifers, the 6 heifers we had that we've now sold and the 24 we've now got, have absolutely been thriving on this stuff. It looks a bit straggly. I'll put photos in the show notes. It is, and it's sort of the tall, long stalks of the brassica is quite an unusual look for a fodder crop. But we reckon these new heifers have easily put on 10 kilograms in the week they've been here. The rule of thumb is around 1 kilo a day for young stock that are on a rising plane of nutrition. So 10 kilos in a week, we reckon that's pretty darn good. We're going to be following up with the supplier of this seed mix and talking to other local seed suppliers to find out more about this super blend of fodder, and we really need to understand what goes in next when it's done. We'll share what we find out and what our plan is in the next Farmcast. Now, the team have just finished a very sexy fencing project at Yankalilla using tanner posts. Tanner posts are similar to Creo posts, but wait for it, they have 90% less exposure to free creosote, have a vastly reduced odour, vastly reduced skin irritation upon handling, and they are dry to touch. The big difference that you'll notice is the colour. It's a lighter colour than traditional creosote. So if you're all about looks, and honestly we believe fencing should all be about safety and fulfilling a purpose, then maybe this product isn't for you. You can always paint it, and your local agri reseller will have suitable products that you can paint on it if it worries you too much. But here's the news. Both creosote and CCA posts will be phased out very soon. They're a thing of the past, they're dinosaurs, and it's time we start looking to the future. I'm going to cover that in more detail in a future Farmcast, because I think it's really important to look at and pay attention to having good stewardship of the land and the environment as a whole. We know and have known for a very long time that both creosote and CCA are not good for the environment, and they are not good for the people handling, or the animals handling the materials. The guys have really enjoyed this project. I'll give you the big tip. No one enjoys a project with traditional Creo, and the finished product looks fab. I'll put photos in the show notes for you. And I should mention, we'll have the Tanner Post team at our farm fencing demo days, so you can get more information and make up your own mind. In the meantime, your local FP Ag branch are selling Tanner Posts and should be able to help you with any queries you may have. We caught up with a couple of really wonderful humans doing really interesting stuff this month. Firstly, as I mentioned, I caught up with Emma Gilbert of the farm Clarendon. Emma produces heritage breed poultry, and it is the only producer in Australia who sells day-old chickens and freights them across the country. She is incredibly generous with her knowledge and is now running workshops to help people new to poultry or keeping chickens. Here's my conversation with Emma, and I have the links to her website and to her workshops in the show notes right there for you. I am with the beautiful Emma Gilbert from the farm Clarendon. On this wonderfully sunny day, we have found ourselves at Main and Cherry at Chandler's Hill at your recommendation, Emma.
It is. It's my favourite drop around here.
Wow. And you're quite a frequent visitor here, not just because the wine's fabulous,
Yes.
but because you also play music.
I do. We do. We're in a little acoustic duo called Purple Rose, and we try and get here monthly to serenade the locals.
Right. Fantastic. So this will be our new haunt, I think, as well. So I've caught up with Emma Gilbert. She is otherwise known as the crazy, colourful chook lady. Would that be right?
That would be very correct.
I don't think she's that crazy. I think she's absolutely fabulous because Emma Gilbert carries a lot of different breeds of heritage chickens. Now, let's start from the top, Em.
Mm-hmm.
How many different breeds of heritage chickens do you have? Chooks, chickens?
Yeah, chooks, poultry, whatever you want to call them. We've got 60 different breeds of poultry, and then in all the different colours and patterns.
Wow, right. And how many breeders of each breed would you have at any one time?
Yeah, so the breeder pens will consist of 20 to 30 birds, and they're top of the line show birds that we've handpicked it over a few years, and then times that by 60 different breeds and then all the different colours.
Wow, okay, so how many acres have you got there at the farm? I mean, I'm picturing 200, 300 acres just to have that many chooks.
No, we've only got 20 acres at the farm. We're pretty intense farming, what we're doing now, but very picturesque and a very prime spot.
Oh, how fabulous. I'm in awe already. Okay, so tell me, how long have you been breeding poultry and how did you get started at the farm?
Yeah, so my grandpa and then his father showed poultry and were right into the showing world. I have never shown, but I've always had a passion for it, and my grandpa is pretty much like my father, and that was something we used to do together and talk chooks. So he's since passed, and it's been an ongoing passion of mine to continue, and it's snowballed from there.
Wow, so your motivation for doing this is it's deeply entrenched in family.
Yes.
And you're doing something really worthwhile on small acreage.
Yeah, for us we thought it was an opportunity to run smaller animals rather than larger animals, obviously with the size, but do it in an intense fashion where they're still free ranging and getting a good quality of life.
I just think that's remarkable. Now, we did have a chat before we started recording, and you sell both fertilised eggs and newborn chicks.
Correct.
So how old are the chicks when you, how do you sell them?
Yes.
You send them on a plane? Do people come pick them up from you? How do you actually sell a day-old chick? Do they not need their mother?
No. So day-old chicks would, I'm sure, ideally love their mothers, but then we become their mothers. So we ship them all over Australia same day within 4.5 hours anywhere in Australia. We have our own created custom cardboard box that we've patented and approved by Virgin and Qantas. And then,
okay, I'm sorry. I have to stop you there. Are you the only ones in Australia selling day-old chicks to anywhere in Australia?
Yeah, correct. So we are the first people to do it in Australia, and same day within 4.5 hours to anywhere metro.
Okay, I just want to let that sink in for a minute. Because I have heard of selling fertilised eggs.
Yes.
And I can imagine that they would be very well packaged and sent. I get that.
Yes.
So my mind is boggling now, and I am losing my my track here. But okay, let me ask you then.
Yes.
So people order they say, I want a a chick.
Yes, correct. Yep.
And so when they are born, you know what day they're going to be born, do you?
Yeah, so we pre-schedule everything. We created an app specifically to help us track our own hatchings because it was a lot of work to hatch 10,000 chicks every 3 weeks.
Yes.
And so we hatch them on certain days and then we schedule in the flights, schedule in the couriers and prioritise all our orders by state and then send that off to the courier and they have a GPS tracker that tracks them everywhere where they're going so their new mummies can see where they are.
Okay, so, and the same happens with the eggs?
Same happens, yes, it can go through our courier service, which is a premium service and it's an extra paid service for the eggs, or we ship through Australia Post, literally chuck it in a satchel, express, pack it up, bubble wrap it, and then pop it in the post box.
Right, so let's go down that track for a minute there. I can expect something to come from Adelaide down to Strathalbyn. I think it's going to take 1 or 2 days with Australia Post and 10 days later. How do you mitigate the risk on that?
Yeah, so fertile eggs can last fertilised for 2 weeks. Australia Post promise with their express parcels that they'll be delivered 2 to 3 business days max. Anything longer than that, we actually take out extra insurance on those parcels so we can recover costs or recover any damages or losses with Australia Post. So they're standing by their word that they will deliver 2 to 3 business days if we're paying for an express service. If not, that's when the customer will then lodge their claim and we pay and they pay for that extra insurance because it's not like a dress that can last in the post.
Yeah, okay, so I'll relax about that then for the time being and know that that's in hand. So tell me, before buying or ordering chicks, what are the key things that you must have in place or you need to consider if you're new to having chicks, or particularly heritage chickens?
Yeah.
What should people be do you tell them? Do you give them a list of what do they need to prepare for?
Well, usually I have 101 calls a day asking, how do we do this? What do? We really want to do it and start a little chicken family. And most of the time I say, make sure you're set up correctly with your coops, your feed. If you're raising chicks, you want those brooders and heat lamps set up already. Especially with your eggs, you want your incubator set up, you want your temperatures already correctly set.
I'm thinking a bit like new mothers of the humankind, where you have that book that says what to expect when you're expecting.
Yes.
Do you produce, do you help people with that as well?
Yeah, I do. We run workshops, which we call Poultry 101, and we sit down for a few hours and walk people through everything from maintaining to how to set up coops, what they need. It's a full literal Bible of Poultry 101 and what to do. But we also have the app Incubate Pro that we created ourselves as well, which has a checklist on everything you need to set up.
And people can, if they're buying from you, they got access to the app?
Correct. Anyone with an app store, iPhone, Android, can just go to the app store and download Incubate Pro and log in, create an account.
Is that a free app or
No,
it's
paid?
Right.
It's a paid subscription, but I guess you only need to do it for a month if you're raising chooks, or if you're a regular breeder and you want to keep track of your hatches, you can have it monthly. So for $15, it's just kind of that safeguard and investment to make sure you're on track.
Okay, excellent. So tell me about the breeding process. How old are chickens or chooks, poultry, when they start producing eggs? And do they produce eggs all year round?
Yeah, so with heritage birds, they start from 16 to 20 weeks as a laying pullet. That's when you start expecting eggs. Heritage poultry are different to your commercial breeds like your Isa Browns or Leghorns. They aren't a longevity bird, those commercial birds. They'll usually last 2 to 3 years, give or take, and they will flat out produce an egg every single day. With heritage birds, you're going to get that egg 9 times out of 10 every day, but there's going to be those skip days, and then also over winter they'll go through a molt and they'll stop laying and stop producing, but they'll last longer. They'll last up to 10 years, so they're a longevity kind of bird.
Okay, and so the seasons affect their laying ability.
Correct.
But what about their diet?
Yeah, the diet is 100% another thing that will affect their laying ability. You want about 17 to 20% protein in their diet. So free ranging your chooks, giving them those extra kitchen scraps that obviously are great to bump up those vitamins, and just making sure you're buying good quality feed from a fodder that
So you
breeds.
need feed as well as chicken scraps.
Yeah, correct. You can't just go throwing kitchen scraps and expect them to survive. You need to have some pellets or some other grain or some other base product with the right minerals and vitamins to make sure they're getting the right feed to then source you with your own protein.
Okay, all right. And tell me, you've got about 60 breeds. All right. I want to know which are the best breeds for producing lots of eggs? If I had half a dozen kids and they ate a lot of eggs, what kind of heritage chickens would I be looking at?
Yeah, we get this question an awful lot. It's our favourite question. We say Rhode Island Reds, Plymouth Rocks, Australorps, Sussex, they're all a great egg production bird. They're a big bird too, so they do eat a lot.
Okay.
All heritage birds will lay eggs, but those are really consistent layers that we recommend to people.
And are their eggs bigger than the little baby eggs, the
Bantams? Yeah, so they're a standard size egg that you'd see, if not a little bit bigger at the shops. And that's usually what most people will go for egg production. But then saying that, even if you have bantam eggs, those birds will sometimes pump out nearly as many, but just so tiny.
Yep, okay. And are there any, which breeds would you recommend if you were going to eat them for meat production?
Meat production. So all of those breeds are actually fabulous meat birds as well. Those eyes.
Do they taste different?
The roosters to the hens taste different. The roosters are more rubbery, a bit stringier. The hens have got that beautiful white breast meat, and so they're probably the more birds that you want to eat. If you're going down that self-sufficient path where you're wanting to eat your own birds, we probably recommend an Orpington, which is even bigger again. They're a big bird. They can get up to 4, 5, 6 kilos. They're big birds. Their egg production isn't up there, but that's something that you can really grow out and pad out for a Christmas chicken.
Okay. And if I want chickens that have a great personality, or they're just a little bit crazy and fun to have around, what kind of breeds would I be looking at then?
Oh, Silkies or Polish, they're up there. Everyone with family or kids want them because they've got that crazy pom-pom, those silly patterns, and they're just those quirky little personalities. They're super sooky. They're like the Labrador of the chicken world.
Oh, I do love myself a Labrador. Okay, all right. And are there any that are slightly more high maintenance or low maintenance, perhaps that would suit a novice, not unlike me?
Yeah, so all our birds are fabulous for novice. We breed really hardy birds. We actually have gone over the years and culled a lot of birds for specific characteristics. So we don't want them flighty. We don't want them to be too soft in the fact that they're hard to maintain. Everything is pretty easy to manage. There's some rarer birds that might be a little bit susceptible to heat or cold, so just be mindful when you're doing your breed research in the Adelaide Hills, because we do get so cold, what breeds you need for your climate.
So are there breeds that like really hot weather, or some that okay, Adelaide Hills, it rains a lot, particularly last year. Are there some birds that really not into wet feet?
Yeah, well, lots of those breeds that have feathery feet, because they get muddy and they get dirty.
The cute ones. What are those ones?
The little Peking Bantams or your Cochins or your Brahmas, they've all got fluffy feet. Same with Silkies, they've got fluffy feet as well. So if you are having those in Adelaide Hills, they're fine with the weather. It's just that moisture and damp and muck. So you just need to make sure you're putting a good bedding down so they stay clean and dry.
Okay, all right. That makes sense. Now, I've had a good look at your website and there's a wonderful amount of information on there. Your chickens are always sold vaccinated.
Correct.
What are they vaccinated against, and is it a one-off vaccination or do they need an annual booster? I've never looked at vaccinating of chooks. I know a bit more about vaccinating sheep and cattle and alpacas and goats. But tell me what's involved with vaccinating chickens and what are you vaccinating against?
Yeah, so we are hot on vaccinating chooks with our hatchery, mainly because we think we have a responsibility to the public to make sure that they're having healthy chooks, and if they're introducing them to other birds that might not have been vaccinated, so they're a little bit hardier, I guess, when they're being introduced. We're vaccinating for Marek's and 2 types of respiratory diseases, which we find a lot in backyard chickens. It can be brought in by pigeons or wild birds, or it can live in the soil for 7 years, or anything. If you're buying poultry equipment off Gumtree or Marketplace, if you're not sterilising those items properly, you can actually be transferring these to your birds. So just always be mindful when you're buying secondhand gear to disinfect and correctly monitor those birds when you're popping them into a new area.
Okay, so if I've got already got poultry on my property and I'm adding in a couple of really sexy heritage breeds, what happens? Does it matter if the new ones are vaccinated and the old ones may or may not be? Does it mean that the vaccinated chooks are no longer covered? How does it work?
The vaccine isn't 100% foolproof. It's similar to the COVID vaccine. It's just going to limit, I guess, what's going to occur to you. So it's the same thing. It's going to limit those symptoms if they do get sick. The other chooks you might already have might be carriers of something. You're not going to know unless you do an autopsy, which most people obviously won't be doing. They will be at risk, and you've just kind of got to accept that you've done the best you can by vaccinating them and hope that that's given them enough of a booster to protect them.
So would you encourage people to add your heritage breed chickens to existing poultry
flocks?
flocks?
Yeah, not ideally.
No.
We like to say clean slate, start from scratch. That's going to give you the best health for your chooks. But then again, everyone does their own thing. Some people have the commercial birds mixed in with the heritage breeds, which we don't recommend because usually they are carriers again. And you kind of null and voiding the whole process of having a really holistic, healthy bird versus buying it from a bulk commercial hatchery.
So if you don't want to combine those two, or it's not recommended, what about if I had, out of your 60 breeds, I wanted 5 different breeds and I had 2 of each? Can I put all those together?
Yeah, you can. All our breeds have been, again, bred to
One
be
doesn't
really
eat
docile.
the other, or?
No, and it's funny because most of the little breeds actually boss the bigger docile breeds
Love
around.
that.
It's so funny.
Love that.
It's pretty cute. So they're all integrated really well, and we usually say to people, buy them younger so then they grow up together. It kind of just gives them that little bit of a pecking order naturally already established. There's plenty of tips around on how to introduce birds if you have existing birds or different age birds around, like sneaking them in at night or things like that. So there's plenty of tips, and we always say please don't interfere when you're introducing them unless they draw blood. Let them try and sort it out, because it is really hard. Every time you interfere, you're just disrupting that process.
Okay, all right. And are there any common problems people experience with heritage breeds, whether injuries or diseases? And are there things that can be prevented? I mean, again, it's coming from a numpty. I know nothing about chickens. Are there common things that go wrong? And I have heard about, brooding is one thing, but I don't think I'm right there. But when they lose their feathers or something.
Molting. Yeah, so molting's pretty common in all birds at this time of year. Autumn's one of those things where you think of the leaves on a tree, the leaves fall off. It's the same as the feathers on a bird, the feathers fall off. So it's very seasonal. They aren't machines, they are a natural system. So you've got to remember they've got to replenish their own nutrients in their body and regenerate. So yeah, they do that. Heritage birds are more known for it. It does happen with Isa browns, but it can look a little bit more aggressive through the heritage because they're so fluffy and big.
Yeah, so can they still produce eggs while they're molting?
Their egg production will drop. Yeah, they're just using all that protein to build new feathers, so they'll usually go off the lay at that time.
And if one's molting, will they all be molting at the same time?
Not necessarily,
No.
Yeah, so it can be a full process. Anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks is how long it'll take for them to lose their feathers, and then a whole another 10 to 16 weeks for them to regrow them. So it's a very big process, and it's a very large cycle.
Do we worry about them when they're doing that? I mean,
we don't want them to go broody. We don't want to introduce new chooks at that time. They're quite stressed. Their body's going through a whole overhaul.
I'd panic, to be honest.
Yeah, they look pretty horrific. They look bald and they look scabby and scaly, and they're not pretty, but when they grow those new feathers back, they're good as new. But yeah, just no high stress things if you're introducing new birds, or just making sure those protein levels are really up in their feed, making sure they've got good quality feed over that time. Because
do you give them a supplement?
You can give them prebiotics, probiotics, just letting them free range that bit longer in the garden to get more bugs and grubs, or you've got your liver moles or your apple cider vinegars, lots of those sort of things that you can incorporate in their diets to improve it.
Okay, all right. Now, do things ever go wrong for you in terms of, you're obviously wanting to produce fertile eggs, but do you have your own house chooks to produce eggs for you guys?
Yeah.
How do you keep them, not so much how, you keep them separate, I suppose, one lot are in your breeding sheds. But do you ever accidentally produce eggs for eating, and then what do you do with them all?
Yeah, our house chooks are supposed to be eggs for eating, but now I can't eat any eggs from our own house pens because I'm used to opening too many eggs with little baby chicks in them when we're incubating. So I'm going a little bit off. If someone's preparing me food, I can eat it.
Funny.
But I cannot do it myself now, and they're in a totally separate area. So we do have house eggs, and my partner laughs at me that we do buy our own eggs from the shops when we have this many birds. So yes, it may be a little bit of a sore point in our household that we don't eat our own eggs.
That is funny. So why have house chooks then?
Just because they're gorgeous, but they're usually the house chooks.
Silly me.
Yeah, the house chooks are usually the ones that might be a bit special if they've been bred with a bung wing or a bung toe, and they're just need a little bit more nurturing. So instead of me putting them in the pot, I keep them and grow them out and love them just the way they are.
And how do you go then with chicken dishes? Eating chicken.
I can eat chicken. It's so funny. I should be such a big farm girl, but I can eat chicken, but I can't pull apart a hot chook from a shop. It is just so ridiculous. I'm really turned off from eating eggs and chicken now. I'm in it, but I can eat it as long as I don't think about it too much. But I really want to, and that was a whole approach for our farm. We wanted to be a bit more self-sufficient, having our own veggies, producing our own meat with the cows and the sheep, and I'm just a bit soft, I think.
Okay, all right. That's made my day. That is wonderful. You're currently running a series of workshops. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about them and where do we go to get more information? Are they all booked out or have you got room for more people?
Yeah, we're about to release a lot more. So we sold out on our first poultry workshop within a few hours. It was crazy. It's called Poultry 101 and it's teaching you everything from hatching chooks to biosecurity to health to how to build chicken coops, the bedding that you need to use and everything else in between. So you're going to get a really good little bag of goodies, which is a lice treatment and bits and pieces that people can take home with them. So it's a really interactive workshop we hold on our property. Right. And we'll be releasing more of those workshops in the next few weeks. So keep an eye out on our social media or our website to book.
And we'll put the links to your website and these workshops in our show notes so people can easily find them. Now, before I ask you the big last question, we've had a great catch up today. I think we're really quite similar in a lot of ways, you and I, Emma. But you've got a few other things going on as well. You also have cattle. Do you have goats and alpacas and stuff?
No, so we specialise in heritage breeds. So we're breeding Highland cattle. That's going to be our new business as well. And we've also got the Harlequin meat sheep, the miniatures. So we
the cute baby doll ones.
Not the baby doll. These are coloured. So very much similar to the baby dolls. Gorgeous little coats, coloured, and they're miniature, which I think are fabulous for hobby farmers that don't want to handle those big merinos or maybe aren't as comfortable yet with the bigger breeds.
Are they self-shedding?
They are, which we find for myself. Being on a smaller farm, great. I know some farmers will have the argument that the wool rubs off on the fencing, but we haven't had too many issues yet. They seem to rub it off on the trees and we haven't actually had too much fencing rust out. And they're just a gentler, placid breed, but also a bit quirky because me being quirky, I have to have something different and they're coloured and gorgeous. So that's another breed that we specialise in at the farm.
And flowers?
And cut flowers too. So my mum is a florist by trade as well. She's a hairdresser but also specialises in floristry. And we do the dahlias are our main plant and flower that we grow, but we also do ranunculus, tulips, sweet peas, you name it, we grow it, and we're doing local cut bunches for our local general stores and some wineries around the area.
Yeah, I was going to say, where do we, buy them? But
so that'll be advertised and released on our social media. We have supplied them last season, but we're just reaching out to new people and seeing what other weddings and other events we might be able to help out.
Wow. Okay. Now, the last question for you, Em. I'm just so grateful for all the time you've given me today.
You're welcome.
What is your bit of advice, your top tip or words of encouragement for anyone wanting to take that first step into having heritage breed chickens?
Just give it a go. Do your research, understand what you do and don't want because they're very different. It's just like a dress. You either like that colour or you don't. Make sure you do your research. Be prepared because it is an investment and it's not something you just get for 1 week and then get rid of. They are a part of your family. But go for it and ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I'm always here to answer as many chicken questions as I can.
Wonderful. Look, thank you so much, Em. It has been just wonderful meeting you.
You too.
I'm sure we will meet again.
I have no doubt.
Yeah. It may well be over a beautiful glass of wine, perhaps here at Main and Cherry again.
Yes.
And I think we'll come to your next gig here as well. That'll be great. Thank you.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
And then we met up with Australian treasure John Pickard. John is the Australian fencing historian. He has had a remarkable career as a vegetarian ecologist and geomorphicist, both here and in Antarctica, and that has led him to researching the role of fences in farming systems in Australia. He's written several books, including The History of Australian Wire Strainers, and there's a new one on the way. Now, when we first connected with him, it was Tim Thompson who connected us, knowing that he was going to be over here in Adelaide for a few days. And in my first conversation with John, he suggested that we go and have a look and try and find this amazing fence, which is just up the road near Wollonga, and the fence posts are made of slate. If you can imagine slate fence posts, how heavy would they be? And I'll tell you what, we wriggled these things and they are still solid in the ground. I have taken some lovely photos. I did get permission from the current owner of the property to share them with you. But it was just, I guess my first thought is a history of Australian fencing really interesting? Some of us would say it's a fairly dry conversation. I can talk to the cows come home literally about cows, but when it comes to fencing, it's functional and it's a good service to provide. But this fence was sexy. It was really, really cool. And I just think it's wonderful to look back and see how far we've come in technologies, but also that ability to problem solve and look at the materials we've got on hand and what we need to achieve. This interview with John was recorded at the Ed in Adelaide, and our apologies for the background noise. Who knew the Ed was so busy at 6 p.m. on a Monday? That was our fault. We won't do that again. Oh, well, we'll probably drop in for a drink, but perhaps we won't record something for the Farmcast.
G'day there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and any others who may be amongst us today. Well, I'd like to welcome you all to the Edinburgh Hotel in the southeastern suburbs of Adelaide this evening, and with me I have John Pickard. Good afternoon, good evening to you, John.
Good evening to you, Pods. Really pleased to be here.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Now, I'll explain to our listening audience who John is in a moment, but if everyone out there can appreciate that we are at the Edinburgh Hotel, there is some background noise. That's just of the general punters having a chat, having a post-work beer, a post-work wine, so please bear with us. But John Pickard was recommended to Bell by a good friend of ours, being Tim Thompson, who is what would you call Tim, John? He would be a fencing...
Tim, according to Tim, likes testing things to destruction. And and this is really important. And what he says, he aims to find out how things break before the customers break them.
You will see a lot of his work on YouTube. If you search Tim Thompson, you will get a lot of good information, a lot of good entertainment on Tim Thompson. However, we have digressed, John. By trade, you are a vegetation ecologist and geomorphologist.
That's
I'm
right.
not going to ask you what all that means. However, in more recent years, through some of your projects looking at native land studies, and you were telling us before the interview, in the far west of New South Wales, you fell into taking a great interest in fencing through the Western Division of New South Wales, and that's since grown.
That's right.
Give us a briefing on that, John.
I was looking at the impact of European settlement in the semi-arid zone, and the two keys are fences and watering points. And there were fences there going back to the 1870s, and for people in the Adelaide Hills who are familiar will have known the name Peter Waite from the Waite Institute. He built fences out there. Some of them are still there. But there's also, since then, obviously, another 100 years of technology. And that was what I was recording, and I became interested in the changing in the technology, the sort of posts, the wires, the tools, the wire strainers. And so I suppose you could call me now historian of Australian rural fencing.
And there wouldn't be many other historians of Australian rural fencing in Australia, so you may be the king of the pops.
Yes.
And we're very, very lucky to have you here with us this evening. Now, speaking of wire strainers, you've written a book called The Australian Wire Strainers.
It's available off my website, Australian Fence Publishing. But if you Google John Pickard and fences, you'll pick me up. There's only one John Pickard who studied fences.
What is the fascination with wire strainers? What drove you to write a book on wire strainers, John?
I find them interesting bits of technology, and it's the classic case of people trying to invent a better mousetrap. And when we started off with iron wire, the strainers were fine, but once we started moving to steel wire and now high tensile wire, they need different sorts of strainers. I've recorded, I think, over 270 different sort of strainers that have been used in Australia. And they're as variable as, well, almost anything you can think of. There's big ones, small ones, some that work, some that are brilliant, and some that are downright dangerous.
Now, speaking of technologies, John, how have improvement in technologies influenced our Australian fences?
Enormously. That's the simple one-word summary. The change from iron to steel and then high tensile wire, the introduction of prefab, the early hinge joints, then ring lock, and we've got a whole bunch of other types now. Barbed wire has been considered essential, but there's now a few people looking at alternatives to that for wildlife protection, and that may be relevant in some of the areas around Adelaide.
Very relevant.
And basically it's a twisted, if you can think of an ordinary barbed wire, Iowa barbed wire, without the barbs. In other words, two strands of wire twisted. Just as effective, but it doesn't damage the wildlife who are trying to go over it or under it, and it keeps out sheep and cattle.
Right, that's most interesting, because on first inspection you would assume, and a wise man once said you should never assume, but here I am assuming that the actual barb as the component of the barbed wire is the component that obviously causes damage to the wildlife and to our stock, but in turn deters them from going under, going over, whatever it be. But having said all, what you're saying to me today is that the two wires intertwined will be just as effective.
Yeah, the Americans are decades ahead of us on this because of things like deer and antelope. We still need barbed wire, don't get me wrong. If you've got a problem with pigs or something digging under a fence, then a bottom barb works really well. But the real problem, it's not just kangaroos and wallabies trying to go over the top. There's all sorts of other animals get caught. Bats get caught in barbed wire. Small hawks get caught in barbed wire. And one of the Australian fence companies has done some tests using what they call barbless wire. I think they're going to call it wildlife wire. And it actually works. And the farms where it's been tried, the owners are really, really happy.
Okay, very interesting. As we have given you a background before coming on air this afternoon or this evening, a lot of our listeners are rural lifestyle farmers, small acreage farmers. Now, how have a lot of these rural lifestyle blocks, small acreage blocks, intensively farmed areas changed the dynamic of fencing?
It's changed it quite a bit in several ways. Firstly, the range of animals that is now being kept has changed. So instead of having things like merinos on broad acres, and merinos respect fences, but some of the other animals don't. So if someone is breeding really high quality Boer goats or alpacas, something like that, then you need to think seriously about alternative fences.
A lot of our clients ask for creosote. Your thoughts on creosote? And before I let you go, I'm led to believe, or I do know, that it is being slowly phased out, but please.
Okay, the creosote or CCA, they are both fantastic preservatives. They'll typically extend the life of a plantation-grown pine post from maybe 5 years to 30 to 40 years. They are really, really good. However, they are biocides. In other words, they kill life. They are toxic. Creosote is toxic to humans, and CCA is also toxic. And creosote is being phased out, and unfortunately for the farming community, it may well be that we're seeing CCA being phased out as well.
Well, that's interesting, John, because I wasn't aware of that until now. That's our first real go-to, is the CCA now that creosote's being phased out. There are other options.
But the CCA is great stuff. It does the job, but it's got these side effects.
I'm very conscious, as most are, that I need to look after my health, being a fencing contractor. I'm also very responsible and need to look after the health of my employees too.
Yes.
So this has really got my grey matter ticking over, and something that Belle and myself will discuss very soon, no doubt.
It sounds almost counterintuitive. We know that we should be using gloves when we're handling barbed wire. I've never yet seen a fencing contractor who didn't have scars all over his or her hands from barbed wire. I've got them myself, and I don't build fences, I study them. But with CCA, you can actually get the material that comes off the posts on your hands. If you're handling a lot of CCA posts, please wear gloves. I know it's hot out there in the middle of summer, but please wear gloves.
And that's a great reminder for myself and our employees, but also our listening audience out there when they're out on farm, when they're fencing. There are many hazards out there, and gloves are just the first line of defence. Now, one thing that I find very interesting, John, fencing as a contractor is not recognised as a trade, nor does it have any formal training or qualifications. However, I think the majority of fencing contractors are very conscientious. They invest heavily back into their business, and you'll see that looking into the back of a contractor's ute, trailers, see all the different tools and accessories they have. But what are your thoughts on that? Because I think a lot of people are driven by the almighty dollar, which I understand, but some people's dollars and their rates don't reflect the type of work they do, i.e. there can be undercutting from those who don't take the profession as seriously as the majority.
I have heard that there are moves to start various ways of accrediting fencing contractors. I suspect it'll be some time. There'll be quite a few in the industry who'll say way past time, that it's overdue. Others will be saying to hell with that. I think that's a pity, because it's a skilled job. It's also an intrinsically dangerous job, which a lot of people don't realise. You're handling wire under quite high tensions. You're also handling machinery. Post hole borers, for example, are very, very dangerous machines. And we wouldn't let apprentices in other industries close to those things without supervision or training. And the other issue is, which fence are you going to build? There's as many choices of different fences as there are, let's say, hamburgers sold at well-known food chains, and which one is the right one for this job. And a fencing contractor knows this. They know what the best fence is for an enterprise and the area. And this is really important. It's the enterprise and the area, and of course the cost.
That's excellent, John, because I'm like you. I believe that our trade or our profession should be accredited. If that is to be asked of me by someone from above, I would say bring it on, for all the reasons that you've just mentioned. Now, to your right, you have a book that you have written. It hasn't yet been released. We're winding up now, John, but before we say goodbye, I'm here to give, you give your book a plug that is going to be released later in the year, on top of the book that we mentioned during the interview called Australian Wire Strainers.
Wire strainers are interesting. Fence posts and droppers, they're pretty boring. You know, they're just vertical bits stuck in the ground holding your fence up and keeping it tight. But there's hundreds of different posts and droppers have been used in Australia. And for example, everybody is familiar with a star post. It's been around since October 1926, almost 100 years. But if you come into South Australia, where I am at the moment, for some reason South Australians call them droppers instead of posts. But there's flat ones, and then there's the half moon ones, which were made by Glen droppers. They're all over the place. And then there's all sorts of the bits that don't hit the ground, which are what we call droppers elsewhere in the country. And there's several hundred of these things, and what I've done is I've compiled all of this into a book, which I'm currently editing at the moment, and I hope to have this out in the middle of the year. It'll be called Australian Fence Posts and Droppers.
Very good. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. If you wish to know more about what John's done, you can look. You can Google Australian rural fences. You'll pick John up there. If you Google timthompson.ag, that will find our man Tim Thompson, and Thompson is with a P, so one word, TimThompson.ag will find Tim Thompson. However, John, thank you very much for your time. Lovely to meet you, lovely to talk to you about fencing. Thank you for joining us on our podcast, and we wish you all the very best, and we will be keeping a lookout for your books, for your second book that's about to be released later in the year.
Well, thank you, Pods, and thank you, Bill, for the invitation. But can I say one last thing before I go? If you want a good fence, get a good fencing contractor who knows their business, and they can produce one for you. If you want a lousy fence and you don't have any skill, build it yourself. And it will be a disaster. Get a fencing contractor to build it for you.
Very, very sound advice, John. Well done, and thank you again for your time.
Pleasure.
Good man.
Thank you for listening to the Adelaide Hills and Fleurieu Farmcast. We continue to get really good feedback about our Farmcast, and it really does help us put together the next month. We really hope you've enjoyed this month's episode and jotted down a few things for your to-do list, or a couple of things you might have some more questions and queries about, and can go to your local agri reseller or people like us at Adelaide Hills and Fleurieu Farm Services. Toodaloo.
Thanks for listening to the Adelaide Hills Farmcast. Belle and I hope you found it helpful. You can leave comments and send questions on the show notes page for this episode, AdelaideHillsFarmServices.com.au. Just click on Farmcast, which is on our website.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.